Hello, everybody. My name is Katie. I'll be helping to facilitate the conversation today. We are recording the webinar, which you probably saw on the way in. So we'll make that recording available afterward, which of course you feel free to share with anyone that wasn't able to attend. We also would love for this to be a conversation. So we welcome all of your questions, comments, input. Our preference would be if you have a question to post it to the chat, so other members of our webinar community can see that and can also interact. But also feel free to use the Q&A tool if that's better. I'll introduce my colleague Danielle Bonner, who's with us today. She is going to help keep an eye on what's happening in the chat tool. She has been given full license to interrupt Alice and myself as we're talking. So our goal will be to, answer as many of those questions as we can along the way. But we will reserve some time at the end to touch on anything if we may have missed it. Yes, and we'd also love to know who you are. So if you have a minute and could just drop a quick intro into the chat, let us know who you are, where you're from, what role you have, and if there's anything specific that you really wanted to hear or get out of the webinar today, please let us know. We're going to talk about a wide range of things, but we can also zero in on those and make sure that we cover that topic as well. So don't be shy. You can do that now, and we'll kind of jump back to that as we go. So again, I'm Katie. So I am co-founder and CEO of InScribe. For those of you that are not familiar with InScribe, we are a virtual community platform. And we help institutions and organizations scale support for their students by creating virtual spaces where they can connect with their classmates, with faculty, with staff across an institution. So they have one place to go when they need help. And our communities are really designed for scale and collaboration. So when a question gets asked in one of our communities, it gets stored, it gets made available to the other members of that community. And that's a lot about what we're going to talk about today with Alice. So if you have any questions about InScribe, obviously feel free to reach out to me. But I am not the star of the show today. I am joined today by Alice Zhao, who is product manager from Kenzie Academy from Southern New Hampshire University. She'll do a little intro on Kenzie Academy in a minute. But just to introduce Alice, she has been working for many years as a product manager in education technology. She really specializes in bringing education to learners through web and mobile applications. At Kenzie, Alice is excited to combine her love for product, startups and software development, and help the next generation of learners break into the tech industry. So Alice, thank you for being here today. We're so excited to have you and to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And I usually do a little setup for everyone, kind of why are we here, why we think this particular topic is really important for today. And I'm particularly excited about our conversation today because for two reasons. One, because of the work that Kenzie Academy does with their focus on not just non-traditional students, but thinking about ways that learners can upskill and find employment and move forward in their employment without necessarily navigating a full degree. And that's obviously a topic that I think is really relevant and something that a lot of people are thinking about. So what are some other ways that we can educate students that are more nimble and flexible? But even more so, what I'm really excited about is that when we partner with Kenzie, they didn't just think about student support as this thing that they're adding on to the academic instruction that they were providing, but really thinking about and approaching supporting students almost as a component of the learning experience. So the act of their students asking questions and helping each other and collaborating together is actually part of their learning and is this skill set that Kenzie knows is also critical for employment. So the way they really wove these things together, I think is really meaningful and something that a lot of institutions are thinking about. Not handling them separately, but really thinking about them as an integrated whole. So I think a lot of that's going to come out in our conversation today. I imagine a lot of you guys are thinking about that. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Alice because I don't know if everyone on the webinar is familiar with Kenzie, but it'd be great to just get a little background about the Academy and the work that you guys do.
All right. Can we go to the next slide, actually?
Yes, and you just prompt me
Thank
along.
you. Well, thank you again so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and share about Kenzie Academy, what we do here, but also the success we've had with InScribe. So a little bit about Kenzie first. We are an online and technical school, but most importantly, Kenzie Academy was created with the very specific purpose of providing access to high quality technology education, but to a wider range of learners from diverse backgrounds. They're not necessarily full-time students, they're full-time students, but with a lot they're juggling at the same time. And we work really hard to make this as accessible and inclusive as possible. Currently, we do have programs in software engineering and UX design, but we have also worked towards expanding financial aid options to make this type of education very financially attainable. And ultimately, our goal is to provide the best education and support the pathways into the tech industry. Next slide, please. I'm really excited to highlight one of our partners. We work directly with Amazon to offer technical programs to their existing employees. That is through their Amazon Career Choice program. This gives Amazon employees the opportunity to learn new skills and level up their own careers. And then we also are one of 2 partners that work with Amazon Technical Academy, which gives us the opportunity to provide a rigorous course in software engineering backend development. We're able to take the program that was originally created by Amazon for their own existing employees, and now we can provide it to a wider audience with the possibility of getting a software engineering job at Amazon. So we're very, very excited about these 2 programs. Next slide.
Yep, and I was just going to say, no. I mean, I'll just like jump in and add.
Excellent.
Well, I think that this trend of, partnering directly with organizations to, I don't know that the education would necessarily have been that different, but having created that partnership creates almost like a more guaranteed is probably not the word that you would use, but you know that you have the qualifications to go into that organization and be successful. So like the confidence that your students have in going through the work that they're doing. It's really interesting to see that trend emerging. I don't know if anyone in the audience is doing some similar stuff at their institution. It'd be interesting to see that, but I think this partnership is so important. Awesome. So you obviously work with a very non-traditional student base, as do, I am guessing, a lot of the folks that are with us today. My sense is that probably had something to do with your identifying that, sort of standard modalities of support weren't going to be necessarily the right fit for everyone that you work with. So tell us a little bit about that process and how you guys identified that maybe there was something additional that you wanted to do.
Sure. So for some context and kind of to brag a little bit, I do feel incredibly lucky that I work with such dedicated teams, instructional teams. We've got senior software engineers and senior UX engineers, facilitators, and coaches. The teamwork that I see and the dedication to the learners is absolutely incredible. They are the heart and the absolute keys to our success. So they come in and they help onboard learners to the program, but truly part of that onboarding is setting our unique Kenzie culture of hard work and accountability and paying it forward. And I think paying it forward also includes support even while you're in class together. But day to day, our team also provides academic and learner support. And then eventually we have teams that enable career planning and help them achieve their employment goals.
I love the way you said that. Those 2 things I think are so important. Establishing your culture with your students, I think all institutions work to do, and can sometimes be more difficult for people who are learning at a distance, like creating that sense of belonging and connection. And then the idea that part of that culture is the pay it forward model. Like, you're not just here for yourself. This is a collective. We're in this together. And, everybody supporting each other makes everyone more successful. And I'm I mean, I just love that you've woven that into everything about the culture that you guys bring to the table. Should I go forward one?
Yes.
Oops, there we go.
But over time, we found that we couldn't necessarily sustain our old model of support. And this is probably going to sound very familiar to a lot of people here in the teams that you support now. Our facilitators and coaches just found themselves in countless one-on-one sessions. And when you're in those one-on-one sessions, you are also answering the same question over and over again. And so we were looking for ways to, of course, we want to support and answer questions, but how do we do that without just being repetitive? How do we share that knowledge at scale? We were looking to just also expand access to the times. Previously our students were 9 to 5 with us all day long, and we're slowly moving towards a more flexible course schedule, which means, our availability crossed with the students' availability are very different. And so how do we expand it without having our facilitators work 12 hours a day or into the weekend all the time? And so that's really where we were looking for a solution for support.
That's great. And I think, as you said, I'm sure those things resonate with like everyone on the call, right? How many times can you answer the same question in one semester, let alone over many, many years? Yeah. And as we know, non-traditional students, they're not really 9 to 5. They're, working in the evenings and on the weekends, and that's when they need help often the most. So let's talk a little bit then about, how our teams got together and how you really, like what that implementation design looked like for Kenzie and for the folks that the students that you're supporting.
Sure. There it is. So we had a pilot cohort. We chose a pilot cohort in September for our software engineering class, and we created a community within InScribe. So that was step number 1. And if you go to the next slide. So we were very much aware that InScribe has an LTI option for lots of different LMSs. But for our LMS, I feel like we wouldn't be a true product team if we weren't doing something super customized and something that was just Kenzie. But we also had a very specific idea of what we wanted for this experience inside the LMS. So what you're seeing here is a sample page from our LMS. And what you're seeing on top of that is a little shelf that comes out. And so we were looking for this customized solution that when you as a learner are in the middle of reading a very specific page that's tied to a topic, we want to be able to provide you other resources and other conversations that are happening around this particular topic. So, for example, this is the topic is Intro to the Terminal. It's introducing you to how to set up your terminal and how to use it. And what you're seeing on the right is actually InScribe content, live InScribe content that's coming in. On the top, if you can see, it's actually pulling in resources from InScribe that are on this topic. And again, below, the conversations that are happening with the classmates. So you find out that, other people might have questions, or I've already asked questions or answered questions. There's a whole conversation happening about this already. And so as a learner, you can see the different resources and also jump into conversations and answer them, or realize no one's asked the particular question you have. And I would love to be able to ask a question on that. So this is basically a window into InScribe. And so instead of having to have your LMS open and then have InScribe open, this is the window in one screen. And then if you want to continue that experience, you get to click on any of those links and take you to InScribe.
Awesome. And I should add in here, so the team at Kenzie had software engineers that were dedicated to this project. And so they built essentially a custom integration with InScribe that would allow them to really tie it into their instructional model really deeply. So we have a set of APIs that you can use to do that, which Kenzie tapped into. We also, though I know not everybody has that, that set of software engineers at their disposal. So we do have standard integrations. So and I think this is Canvas sitting behind. Yeah. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So, you can, using just LTI, you can integrate InScribe into Canvas, D2L, Blackboard, edX, all the standard learning platforms. And that's really just sort of turnkey click of a button, but it accomplishes the same goal. You can get to this topic level integration where you're seeing any resources that have been shared, previous conversations that have come up around the topics that you're discussing in those individual courses. I'll just add one thing because I saw it pop up in the chat, which is right now we're really focusing on this academic use case, which is so beautiful and works so well. But if you work in a different area like student success or admissions, you can also use these communities of practice and support in those areas as well. So they're really flexible to kind of work across. And I think we'll talk a little bit about some of our upcoming things that we are looking to do with Kenzie as well. Let me pause real quick, Danielle. I've been trying to keep track of the chat. I feel like I'm a little scattered on that. So is there anything that's come in that we should make sure that we address?
We have a fantastic upbeat chat today. So
I know.
everyone, please.
I'm usually really good at staying on top of it, but
right, I am as well. So please keep the comments, questions coming in. There was a question about InScribe as an out-of-the-box solution and how easy that implementation would be. I think you covered that, Katie, but if you'd like to add anything there, that's the only question that we have at this time.
Awesome. Yes. So just to reiterate, you do not need a custom product team or custom engineering. If you have that, great. If you don't, that's much more common. And so we do have just turnkey out of the box. We use LTI to integrate into your LMS platform. We can also integrate into other things at your campus, like websites, portals, and we can just tie into your whatever central authentication system you're using on campus. So then your students just use their credentials to log into InScribe. And I would say, by and large, up and running in about a week for most of our communities, depending on if people are available to get on a quick chat or not. So it's very easy to get up and running.
Wonderful. Keep the questions coming into the chat.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. So sorry we jumped in on your flow there, Alice.
Oh, no worries.
But this looks beautiful, and you guys have done such a nice job to really, again, tie the support directly into the learning experience so they become really one thing altogether. And one of the questions we always get is how do you tell students about this? How do you get them to actually use the community? So it'd be great to just hear some of the strategies you guys use to help students understand what it was for and how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but before we had InScribe, almost all of our communications happened in Slack. So we were, all the communities, all the talks, or all the questions and answers, and across all the topics, and and you have so many channels and notifications and announcements coming in all over the place. So everything kind of lived in Slack. And because of that, it just became this deluge of information that was very hard to parse through. And so we're very excited to get InScribe because we felt like we could, with the ease of use of the platform, it's easy to figure out what needs to be answered, when did it get answered, what's the thread, and that beautiful network, question support network. I want to say that our team, and one of them is on the call right now, they were so bought into this new model on day one. They were adamant, I would say relentless about the success of this. But they would, they were first to say, oh, there's a question that came on Slack. You know what? That's a great question. How about we continue this conversation on Slack? Oh, that's another great question too. How about we start, let's move that over there so that I'll answer it in InScribe, and then everyone else can see the answer and benefit from it. Right. They also wanted to encourage use, and we actually talked a lot about using the posting anonymously feature on InScribe. I think that's just, whether you're in person or virtual, there'll always be this hesitation to want to raise your hand and say, I actually did not understand that at all, or I'm stuck here. And the anonymous feature gave them that confidence to engage in InScribe. But I think overall, it's communicating the benefits of InScribe that, really gave the student buy-in for that experience.
That sort of pay it forward model. We're going to collaborate on this piece together. Absolutely. And just to extend, so if the anonymous feature, when an individual goes to post an InScribe, they have some control over the visibility of that post. So they can just post it to everybody. They can post just to the moderators, or they can post anonymously, which means that the other students in the community don't know who posted it. So the moderators can still see who posted it, but the other students cannot. And we implemented that feature for just what Alice said, which is like you sometimes have students who are a little nervous to participate. And what's interesting in the research that we've done is that non-traditional learners, adult learners, actually are more reluctant to raise their hand and ask for help and to admit that they're confused than traditional students often are, because they come in with this self-conception of like, well, maybe I don't belong here, or everyone here has been doing this for years and I'm changing degrees or changing careers. So having tools and solutions that help normalize the fact that everybody has questions, everybody gets confused, not only help that person participate, but also ultimately improves the confidence of that individual and their long-term ability to succeed. So I'm glad that you guys saw that utilized and that it was working for your population as well. So let's see, I think we're going to look at some examples of what's been going on in this pilot community and some of the value that you've been seeing.
Hey, Katie, before we go to the examples, I know you answered the question about SSO and SAML. Would you elaborate on that as well?
Sure. Yeah, we had a question in the chat about, I mentioned LTI as one option for integration. We had a question about whether we also do single sign-on. So the answer is yes, and we can essentially do single sign-on for any of the standard methods that are out there. So things like OAuth, SAML, Shibboleth. If you're a Google school, students can just log in with Google. So, and the advantage of that, of course, is that your students have one set of credentials. They don't need a new set for InScribe. And you can put access points to InScribe literally anywhere you want, whether it's a website, an email, a text message notification, a portal. When the student clicks on it, they would just be prompted to use their school login and be able to get in.
We also have an attendee that has a really great vision, I think, for how they could use it outside of the institution. And so they want to know, can we have individuals outside of the institution join communities? So we talked a lot about students and facilitators. What about alumni? What about recent alumni would be recent grads as well? So
I'll give a technical question, but then I'm going to ask Alice for her opinion. So there's no limitation to who you want to allow into your InScribe communities. So you have control over that, you decide. But if you want folks from outside of the matriculated student population, whether they're alumni, prospective students, leaders in the community, if you want to welcome them in and give them places in your communities, you can absolutely do that. Alice, I'm curious how you guys engage with your alumni today, sort of regardless of InScribe, and how you kind of think about building that larger community of your students over time.
Sure. As I mentioned before, our whole lives are kind of in Slack right now. So we do have an entire Slack community that includes alumni. And so we're mixing alumni as current students or anyone who might be coming to do an AMA. So we have that mix there, and that's where it currently lives. And you'll see, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but these are some of the things we're thinking about. Does it belong on InScribe? Can we use those communities more effectively there than in Slack?
Yeah, awesome. And I think if you've built in this mentality of, pay it forward or give back, your alumni are going to be so excited about continuing to participate with your current students. There's something very,
for sure.
I know in the alumni that we've worked with, the feedback that we often get is, it's nice to be able to provide that value and see that I'm giving benefit to a student rather than just making a contribution, or it's a different way of engaging and continuing to feel like you're part of that school that you love so much.
For sure.
All right, Danielle, are we good to move forward?
We are good.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, so let's talk through some of these examples.
So here, let's see. So yeah, you'll notice that everyone's having very similar questions. There's a lot of duplicate questions, but you can also, or you see that even if there are duplicate questions, we can connect them in some way so that you can connect two questions and realize that they're related. But I also think that it prevents exact duplicate questions.
Yeah. And it was interesting on these two is to see like the number of people that were looking at the question. So when a question came in, the fact that 464 of your students have looked at it, you're like, oh, okay, so that's maybe 463, similar questions that we didn't have to address because we got it nailed in this one thing. And I think we did see over and over again, people would post things like, me too, I'm having the same problem. Let me know when you figure this out, and so being able to consolidate that under one banner, so to speak, is really, I think, helpful for the students and the coaches. But it wasn't just about efficiency, right? We've been talking on and on about this idea of students helping students. And you want to just talk a little bit about what you were seeing in the communities and how you think about that?
Yeah, I actually feel like within the first 2 weeks, so I think you mentioned this earlier with the non-traditional learners, they come from all different backgrounds. They have all different types of experiences. Some come in for us, some come in with previous technical knowledge, and some are just complete beginners. And that's what we want. We're not limiting anyone to having prior tech understanding. But what we saw early on was that all those brand new folks with zero knowledge before were asking all these very, beginner questions, and that's what we expect. But we saw the folks that happen to have prior experience, they felt that empathy because of the transparency of the questions that were coming in, and they were very, very quick to answer as well because they were paying it forward before they even started, truly. And it was such a wonderful thing to see. And it was not, I don't think any of us prompted these students to do that. I think that was just how they are. And so I think that kind of also got the ball rolling, and people saw others helping each other out. They knew kind of who to reach out to, but really on this, like an organizational level type view, you could see that it's working at scale.
Right.
No one was sitting there waiting for the facilitator or someone on the staff to answer the question. Certainly they can moderate and, star one as the best answer or it's endorsed, but you see that support is coming in all different ways and faster as well.
Right. Like your coaches almost can't get to it fast enough before another student has jumped.
Oh, yes, exactly.
They're like, wait, I wanted to get that one.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because now as you talk about, and we'll have another slide where we talk about more other ways that students were encouraging each other, but we did have a question about, did you find that there were examples of students not being nice to each other or, quote unquote, behaving badly in these community spaces?
I don't think we really saw that. And, I think Mike's on here as well. He can add in the chat if he wants to. But I don't think we saw that. And I think a lot of it is due to how we set the stage and expectations and, kind of the playing rules when you engage in this platform that we're here to help and not, here to put anyone down. And so I don't think we saw a lot of that at all.
Yeah. And I'll just speak more broadly. We never see, I can't think of a single example of when we've seen a student treat another student poorly in a community. And even what other people worry about is maybe a student complaining or, using it as a forum. That's very rare. And the only times when we have seen that, the other students tend to jump in and course correct and be like, that's not quite right. Or I don't think, you missed something here. So they really buy into this idea that they're building a community and there are norms that they want to maintain among themselves. And so setting the stage early, Alice, I think, as you pointed out, is great. And then the participants just tend to carry that forward. There you go. Nico is saying nothing but total support. We did have a quick question. I'll just jump on it since I just saw it. So do you have a sense how much time your coaches spend specifically on moderating or checking on the InScribe community? Are you guys measuring that, or do you have that tech?
I probably don't have a good number on that, but it is part of their job just to make sure that it is moderated within the hours that they are working.
Yeah. And I would say, by and large, it's an hour a week. It depends on the type of community. So in a super active community where a lot of questions are coming in, it's going to be a little higher. That might vary a little bit. But the intention is that you're taking the questions that you maybe would have been answering in email or in these one-on-one sessions and moving them into the communities. You're actually saving time in the long run by consolidating it into this one space. I can't keep up with the chat. So Danielle, you're going to have to let me know.
There's a lot of chat. I love it.
What's going on in there?
There is another chat question that just came in. Is this web-based only, or is there an app?
Today it's web-based, mobile responsive, but our native mobile app will be coming out in about a month. So both of those options will be available to your users.
Awesome. And then Mike and Nico are doing great at responding to the other questions. So I think
Thanks, Mike and Nico.
You're hired.
They're here to help me out. Thank you.
they're doing awesome. So I love this slide. And when we were putting it together, there was almost like too many examples to choose from. So I'm glad we're able to narrow it down. But this idea that, we've reinforced this a couple of times, communities aren't just about the tactical side of getting help. They really are places where people go to, express themselves and find people who think and feel like them and find their sense of belonging. And so would you like to just speak a little bit to some of the stuff that we see here?
Yeah, I think, especially as they are non-traditional learners, that imposter syndrome is real. It is real from before they even started, and it's really difficult to overcome. But I think when you have this transparency, I was just talking to someone earlier today, and I'm like, you think about it, we had no idea if anyone else had the same question ever. We all worked in our rooms, and you submit homework, but you have no idea if anyone has the same question. So for us, for the first time, we're seeing this transparency of people having questions or people struggling. And this helps you realize, oh, I'm not the only one. Yeah. And I think sometimes when the first person is vulnerable, the second person is willing to be vulnerable as well. Totally. And then this, layer of beautiful support and encouragement comes in, and then it becomes this just accepted culture of encouragement that, oh, we're all in this together. We're all going to come out of it on the other side, especially if we can support each other through it. Yeah. And I'll give you this one story because I just was in a learner interview yesterday, and I swear, when I'm in our learner interviews, I come out of it always so happy, because what I hear are people who struggled. So the person was in this cohort, and they struggled in the first 4 weeks of this particular cohort, they were ready to drop. But because of the level of support, everyone jumped in, and probably hearing very similar things like this. It's just imposter syndrome. You'll get through it. And he eventually breezed his way through the first quarter, now is in the advanced class. And he was just bragging yesterday about his 100% on the first submission into the advanced class. And I was just like, we couldn't see his video, but you could hear him smiling, because he was just so proud. And I'm like, this is the type of support. Yeah. And if there's anything that makes Kenzie truly unique, it's this, that we all just care that much about each other.
Yes. And that just takes that one person, as you said, to be vulnerable, to let everybody see everybody's feeling that way. I mean, you're going to make me cry. That's such a great, beautiful story about that individual student. I love to hear that. And this just happens. You don't have to do a lot in your community to manufacture this type of interaction. Right. In fact, the less you do, the better. Students will just do it themselves, and it's just like a natural extension of particularly some folks who are willing to share and then bringing others along for the ride and kind of building each other up. I did want to say, just as an add-on, because that conversation around, do you see people behaving badly, and how do you handle that? And we've talked a lot about that doesn't really happen in these communities. It's not, people they use this as a place to build each other up and support each other, but we do have some tooling in the platform that can help you keep an eye on that. So one of the things is that we will run the conversations through what's essentially a sentiment API. So it's measuring the emotion of the posts. And so if someone were to post something very negative, like either really angry or frustrated or kind of going at something, the system will proactively identify that and flag that post and escalate it for you. So we're not preventing it necessarily, but if it were to happen, you would know about it right away and could step in and intervene. And it doesn't take a lot to kind of course correct people back to where you want them to be. So this is all amazing. I mean, it's lovely to see how the students use it, how they gravitated toward it. It would be great to hear, oh, and then I forgot we had this. So talk a little bit about this slide, because I think it's really interesting to see how students use the platform over time.
So this one is a slide that's just like, I think it's an aggregate of the whole week. So I think would be really interesting is if we saw the heat map of the entire week, because we'll see all these weekend hours we couldn't get. But yeah, for sure, this one day, you can see that while there's, a peak in the middle of the day, there's still a huge amount happening after, 4 p.m., 5 p.m. And depending on the time zone you're in, it could be like 4 p.m. Pacific. And that's when you're actually getting started on work. But they're still able to get help deep into the night. So they don't have to feel like, oh, I can only get help at 9 to 5. I can still get help. It might not be nearly as immediate, but you can definitely expect to get help.
Yeah, right. And like the support team may not be online, but the other students certainly are, right?
Right.
So you're not learning alone, even at whatever this is, midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. So having just being able to naturally expand the access. And I agree. I think we should look at a weekly map, because I think those weekend hours would be really interesting as well.
Yeah.
We had a question pop in about moderator notifications. So how are your moderators monitoring the communities and knowing when to jump in and when questions are getting posted? Do they have that or?
I think you can turn on and off notifications in different forms. They're by default, I think the email notifications are on. I know the students were all like, oh, every time a notification, that's also how, some of our learners are like, oh, someone else had a question, I'm going to answer this right away.
Right.
But I also know that when they log into InScribe, there's a view that they prefer, the reading panel view, and it's easier to see what hasn't been answered or what needs attention. And I believe that's how they're going through it every time they log in.
You can either come into the app to get the summary, or the app will push those notifications out to you today via email. And then you'll get mobile notifications once the mobile app comes out as well. Awesome. So now I can do my little segue. So it would be great to know, it seems like it's working. How are you guys thinking about, the changes that you want to see, and how are you thinking about measuring the value and the impact of the communities over time?
We're
going to talk about activity. Oh, geez. Well,
no worries.
So that's how we measure the impact of it. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, we can see how just throughout, there's just so much activity for both active members and new users. There's just so much happening over time, and it's been fairly consistent. There's only drops, and I'll tell you because they're both holiday. And then in January, the semester was coming to an end, and they were working on their capstone projects, and then it spiked back up when class started.
Yeah, so. And I'm seeing that really consistent pattern. And of course, you're like, oh, there's Thanksgiving, there's Christmas. Like even students take a break.
Yep.
And I think that same activity level was reflected. Here we're looking more at the types of activity that were taking place in the platform, but seeing that really can happen consistently throughout the experience. Did you see any spikes around assignments maybe are due when we see these little spikes pop up?
Yeah, they're usually So all of our assignments or our major assignments are due Monday. So I'm almost certain that if you check the date on those, it's like right before Monday. There's a lot of questions and activity.
Which is also good to know, because not even the best of us procrastinate at times. And so you get right up to that deadline, and then knowing that, you know, even though you're working toward a deadline, if you need that help, it's available. I think it's probably really reassuring for your students. And then I think we had one that showed.
We have a couple of questions that have come in.
Oh
Katie.
yeah, let's talk about them.
So who's considered a new user? What does that mean, new user?
So a new user would be somebody whose account is being created at that moment in InScribe. So they've never been into InScribe before. So I think in the case of Kenzie, what we saw, see if I can get this to go back up here, is that they preloaded all of their students before the term started.
Yeah.
So we had the students active, but we weren't adding new users throughout the semester because they already had all been added to the community. Other communities that don't do that will see like sort of a steady drumbeat of new people joining the community over time.
And then what users in the InScribe product are seeing these analytics? Is it only admins? Is it all instructors, facilitators? What is the permissions on the analytics look like?
So these analytics are visible to anybody who is a facilitator or admin in the community. So the students are not, or the individual members of the community are not seeing this right now. I'd be curious about why that, like, what was the motivation behind the question? If you want to provide more.
The question was really around, will all instructors see the analytics? But in this case, we have more facilitators using.
Gotcha. Yes. So assuming your instructors are facilitators of their community or admins of the community, then they would be able to see these metrics and these analytics as well.
Perfect. That's it for now.
Thank you. All right. So then why don't we talk about some of the outcomes that you're seeing and how you're thinking about that?
Sure. Our first pilot was really to focus on the operational outcomes. So really trying to figure out how do we scale support. With this first pilot, we felt like we could confidently move forward and scale. Certainly we'll scale at a more reasonable rate, but we felt confident to move towards this new model. And we just started 2 new cohorts last week with this new model as well, and also with InScribe. But what we saw first almost immediately was there was just a drastic decrease in the number of one-on-one support sessions. Our facilitators, again, were just in one-on-ones all day, every day, and it was exhausting. And so because we moved to this on day 1, and I think that's also key is launching with this, is that you're not correcting behavior, you're setting the expectations of that behavior in the beginning. Nico and Mike are on here, but they could probably tell you they breathed a huge sigh of relief. They're like, oh, this is very different. And so it gave them capacity to do other things or dive deep into other issues with learners that weren't just like regular support with questions on the course.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something a lot of people feel in all different capacities, right? Is I'm spread so thin trying to answer all these individual questions that I can't like focus my time and attention on the deeper things that only I can really do. So it's great to hear that is one of the things you guys are seeing. So going forward, you know, what's next for Kenzie, and you know, where does your vision take you?
Yeah, so just like I said last week, we added 2 new cohorts, and then we're adding 2 new cohorts next week, all of them using InScribe. So this gives us a lot more information and data to review on the success of adding InScribe and using this new model. We're also having conversations on, you know, how do we create, instead of cohort by cohort, how do we create this community feel across the cohorts, the different programs, and then additionally, like the different parts of the learner life cycle. So how might we include InScribe earlier in the pre-start phase, as well as in the alumni phase, but then also crossing them from alumni and having that, you know, connection from alumni to the current learner. So you're just truly creating this network over all of Kenzie.
Awesome. Yeah. And the academic use case that we looked at today is really clear. People, of course you're gonna have questions about your curriculum and your learning, but it's, interesting to think about, well, before people even start their program, they have questions about the program and what it's really gonna be like, and they would love to connect with other people. So I love that you're thinking about that full life cycle as well. Danielle, anything else that's come in on the Q&A?
Yeah, we have an attendee that uses Facebook groups. And they're talking about how, when you're in Facebook groups and you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, you get lost in that scroll, right? I mean, it's a little much. So they want to know how InScribe is different than a Facebook group would be.
Yeah. And Alice, you probably experienced that with Slack a little bit too.
Yeah, that feels like Slack.
Real time. So yeah, let us know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a very similar use case where it is, how do we even find that one conversation that, that person had 4 days ago, but there was a great answer to it. Well, how do I quickly find it? So I would say the big difference is like in InScribe, it's a much easier find. You guys have a great, AI assisted search option. So you can start your question and see a list of questions or conversations that might be related to what you're asking. There's also topic tagging for each. So you're saying, maybe I don't have a specific question, but I'm just curious about what people are talking about in this topic. That is something you can filter by. And I think that's been really, really helpful. Especially because we, as a cohort, we move together.
Right.
So your topics, they're on target for this week it was this topic, this next week is that topic. And you're just going right into what the topic of the day, really.
That's likely to be relevant. Yes, that's totally true. We have the same, we use Slack in our own company, and surprise, we also use InScribe, because there is so much noise sometimes in that transactional system that you just lose sight of the little nuggets. So just having those set aside in a more searchable repository, I think we can all appreciate the value of that. So Katie, that was a great question. Thank you for asking that. Anything else you want us to touch on, Danielle?
Looks like we're up to date on all the questions that have come in.
All right, thank you. So if you have additional, oh, I just saw a question.
Yes.
And I just started coughing. So Alice, did you have to incentivize your students to answer each other's questions? Or do you feel like that just happened naturally?
Yeah, I don't think we made any concerted effort to incentivize them. I think it was the transparency of you saw others answering questions, and then your natural, reaction is, oh, I just finished that assignment, and you have a question, they're able to answer that.
Yes, totally. There was a question, is there anything built into InScribe? So we do have a reputation system in InScribe. So as you're participating in the platform across various types of activity, you can earn reputation points and level up, and that's visible to the other members of the community. So we do a little of that, still kind of intrinsic motivation to encourage people to participate, but it's often not needed. As Alice said, you just see other people and they're participating. Students kind of love to jump in and help each other. And so a lot of that just happens really organically. Can we designate what communities? Yeah, so we had a quick question. So right now, Alice, your communities are tied directly to your cohort. So you're controlling access through the LMS. Is that true?
We do from the LMS, we do have single sign-on.
Okay.
But on the InScribe end, we're also just adding folks to communities as well.
Okay, perfect. So Esmeralda, the short answer is yes, you can absolutely control who has access to which communities in your platform, and different communities can have different types of access. So some might be locked into just, students enrolled in a particular cohort or in a class. Others might be open to your alumni to participate. So that's very flexible, and you have 100% control over that. Awesome. Anything else coming in? Don't hesitate. Put in your questions last minute. Oops. I'm like over clicking here. Okay, so first of all, Alice, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming and sharing the story. I love the work that you guys are doing, and it's just seeing how you all interact with the students in the product and how the students interact with each other. It's very clear that everyone is bought into the culture that you guys bring to the table. And I know that that's a huge part of the success that your students have. So thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
We did have one more quick question coming in from Katie. So how was it, what was your experience in getting InScribe up and running and working with the team here and getting support from us as part of that?
Oh, sure. I mean, we went the hard route. We just had to do something super custom. And I think we were able to work directly with your team and make some polite requests to the API to make it work for us as well. I don't want to promise it for a wide audience, but because we were going for such a custom experience, we were able to do it with collaboration with you. And so I want to say thank you to InScribe's team for working with us, because it made our lives much easier to be able to work through any of the issues we were having.
Well, you guys were really fun to collaborate with too. We love to accommodate during that implementation process. But normally the implementation process would not be,
I think,
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it would be super, super easy.
Awesome. Well, I think that Daniel put a little more information about Kenzie Academy and about Alice into the chat. So feel free to follow those links and learn more. Also, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that just got dropped into the chat as well. I'd love to get to know you all a little bit better. And certainly if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. As we always say, it takes a village. So we're all in this together, and we would love to learn with you as well. So thanks again, Alice. Great to see you. And we look forward to seeing you all again at a next webinar.